All right. Today is Thursday, February 27th, and this is a design and usability meeting. On our agenda today, it starts with the user experience study update. And I know, Tim, you had stuff. I don't know if you want to do this first.
I'm fine with that.
Okay.
I mean, it's kind of a big deal in a way. Let me preface this. This came up, people like, oh, it's a great idea, we should do this. I got excited, I dove into it. One of the things I'm questioning right now is whether it's the right use of my time, although I'm excited about it, so that makes it a good use of my time. But let's come back to that after we talk about what we've done so far and where this is going. So again, I did two tests. I just did a second one an hour ago, a half hour, finished that just over a half an hour ago. So it's not public, it's not available. It's with a different user. I'm certainly learning about doing usability tests as I do it and modifying the script. I think there's definitely lessons to be learned from what I've done already. Peter asked a great question about making decisions based on a single user's experience. And I started to, if I didn't reply yet, to say, Peter, I don't think we should make decisions based on any single usability test. I think we can learn things from an individual user test, but I think we can make decisions based on a batch of usability tests. So the goal would be to do 5 or 6 of them and to look for common problems that people are having. But it's not, this isn't like super scientific. There's a lot of subjectivity in doing usability tests, so we always have to keep that in mind. But I think if you watch them, you'll see how powerful they are in terms of just, especially I think if the interviewer asks good follow-up questions, which was hard the first time because I wasn't being picked up. On the second one though, the user had a little bit more experience with structured data, and so I'm not sure that it makes sense to take a WordPress user with no knowledge or backdrop and ask them to build a content type without giving them some clues, because it's just such a paradigm shift that it doesn't make sense. Although I might do 1 or 2 more like that, but on the whole, I think the user I had today had some experience with structured data, so I thought he might get it. He's had the same kind of issue though, trying to figure out how to build a new type of content. And even after I talked with him about you want to build a new type of content, right? And with those words in his mind, he still went up and down the structure menu, and he went right above, he hovered over content types. But I followed that up with okay, let's pause here, because you've hovered over this content types. Why did that not look like the solution? And I think if we can do those kinds of questions, that's really, really helpful. So
yeah, I agree.
Anyways,
what I've noticed, because I have a person which is a friend in Greece, and he's a WordPress user, and he's been using Backshop for a while, on and off now. So but he's a little bit more turned on, I would say. The concepts of them using content types is strange, but they do have an additional sort of contributed module that does that. I think it's called pods or something. It just boils down to that most WordPress site builders do not use content types. It's not that they don't need them or there's not such concept. It's just that they're used in a different they're used to a different workflow that doesn't involve constructing these kind of structures in the website that they built. I'm not saying that it's not useful or anything. It's just that it's a mindset.
So the questions I have right now going forward are one is this, I don't want to spend a lot of time aggregating a bunch of data that we just don't have the capacity to make use of. So I'd like feedback on that, but assuming we are able to, to think a little bit more about who we should be testing, would it be more beneficial for us to be focusing on Drupal 7 users and like testing their ability to use the layout system? That might be more useful, or is this, like the two people I've done right now had very little Drupal experience, and so that's a different kind of a test. So that's one thing, and on the other is what features, right? It might be that there are certain features. Doing a usability test on views, like that seems pointless because we know that there's so much wrong and we have limited capacity to fix it, right?
Yeah.
So I want to test things that we're going to learn things about and we're going to be able to do something about it.
Yeah, I feel like field UI is another thing that
Right.
like we already know the easy things to fix and the hard things are so hard that I'm not sure we're going to get an answer for that immediately. And it might be worth like, waiting until we think we're closer to working on that. Like we have someone committed to doing whatever, and then doing a bunch of extensive tests only on fields. And trying to figure out like, okay, we're going to do all of these different challenges about different types of fields and see where you get stuck. But I think what's useful about what you're doing right now is that we are testing people's ability to learn about concepts that exist in Backdraft. And the fact that there are different content types and those content types can have fields is something that I would really like to be discoverable. So that if we have people who are WordPress site builders and they come to Backdraft and they're wondering what is different about it, that's something that can be like, oh, I can do this. I can create my own structured data in a way that maybe they've needed that for a long time, but never had it. And if they can find that in Backdraft, I think that's still valuable. So I think rather than maybe having them add a bunch of different fields, just trying to get them to understand like there is a content type and you can add fields is enough. And I thought that the usability study was pretty good about that. It had, I don't know, maybe 2 more fields than necessary, but you need to have a couple of different fields so that people understand that that's possible, that, it kind of settles into them that that's there. Was also really interesting. I haven't watched your second study, but the first one, where the guy, as soon as he figured that out, was like, oh, I think maybe this isn't for me, which was also interesting because I'm like, oh, but it could be like, in just the fact that the overall impression I think might be that it's more technical than it is, where it's like you could have a post type that has 1 extra field, and maybe you have a recipe site, and that's something that would be really great on WordPress but also could be better maybe on Backdraft. So there's stuff like that I think is still really valuable to test. I agree that we shouldn't be making any changes off of the results of 1 study. I think it would be good if we could get 5 or 6, which I think was what you said. And I think that in terms of what we're learning, the way we handled it with the Drupal usability study is we did all of the tests first, and then we sat down and we made a spreadsheet and we noted user 1 had a problem with this interface, user 2 had a problem with this interface. And then at the end, we're like, okay, there's obviously 4 areas that people had a lot of trouble with, and that's our highest priority. I think that's probably what we should be doing here also. And I'm happy to, I really like watching these usability studies, so I'm happy to start making some of those spreadsheets and putting in some of that data. But I think when we get done with the studies and done with the collection of data, it would be good to have another meeting, like a real time, and go through and be like, okay, what can we fix about making things more discoverable? That's a kind of a hard, it's not just to put a button in a different place. And we might need to bring in, some designers and stuff to help us convey that better. But yeah, I think it's important. I think we should keep doing it. I think especially because you're passionate about it, it would be good to, get all the data we need. And I imagine the hard part will happen at the end when we're trying to choose our priorities and create issues that map to the problems we're trying to solve. But yeah, it is hard because you watch one and you're like, oh, we could totally change that label. Okay, maybe there should probably be an issue for changing the label, but that might not be a priority. So yeah, just kind of moving forward, I think is good. I'm also really fascinated by all the stuff that we're learning here. So I'm willing to put time into it.
There were some, sorry, go ahead.
I think it's super useful and important to define as well as you can what question you're trying to solve with these things, because there's such a wide range of possibilities that, and the fuel, like the people that haven't tried it before is such a such a rare resource, because once they do it once, they're burned up. They now know it, and they're not useful anymore for figuring out how hard it is to learn something and discover something. And I think this is like super important for us to learn, both where we were at the cutting edge of sort of the Drupal discovery of this process, and ultimately to push it beyond. So I think it's super important to identify two groups of users: the ones that have used Drupal before and have some sense, so that we can find out, like, okay, the things we've changed, layout manager, CMI, stuff like that, like how well is that getting through? And then people who don't know that, we want to be able to make sure that it works for them. And in particular, I'll stop after this comment, but I mean, as Drupal and CMS people, we're very, very used to the kinds of problems that can be and can't be solved by these systems. And I think it's incredibly easy to forget and hard to relate to people that don't even know what they're supposed to be able to do. Like the example of the WordPress people that say, okay, there's fields, maybe this isn't for me. And like if they were experimenting with Node.js and Express, that's true. Like if they got into it, they would realize, no, Ruby on Rails is not going to work for them. And so they might have like appropriately tuned triggers that let them know, okay, this is a level that I don't know, and I should just give up. There's no point in wasting time for this. But we don't want to generate false negatives for that. We don't want people who actually can use our thing to incorrectly get the message that they can't go away. We want those people. They're like our core audience. Anyway, I'll stop now.
Yeah, I have.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Greg.
So I have a couple of comments before I forget them. Although I agree that we shouldn't be making decisions upon only a single user, because it could have been their level of tech savviness. It could be a lot of things. I agree that having more usability tests will help us. I agree that we could sort of like categorize the usability studies that we do to people that come from Drupal and people that don't. But there were certain things in the usability study that I've seen, the video that I've seen that's published, that sort of like make sense, and they're tiny things. Like when the person said, I'm clicking home just to double check that I'm actually in the home page. This totally makes sense. Like, we have no active color in the menu, and it's like a tiny thing that could fix this. It wasn't a big problem, because at the end it's just one click just to make sure things work, but still it's a tiny thing that we can improve. The other thing that comes to mind is, so the agency that I work for is doing training sessions for government people, and we have a survey after the training. And also, before people attend, we ask the government agency that arranges the training for them, the department that they work for, we ask them if they have worked at CMS before, and which one, and if they had previous experience with that, and how much experience they had. So when I was watching the video, I couldn't help, especially when he mentioned it himself, the person that was taking the usability study, saying, I'm going to go back to the dashboard because that's what solves my problems. That's where I found the solutions. So I thought that somehow we could incorporate a thing that for newcomers that says, hey, have you used Drupal before? Just a tiny message up there. And if they say yes or no, we adapt things in the user interface. The adapting could be either things in the user interface or the help that we provide to them. Like, hey, did you know that Drupal has structured content, or you can use fields? Things like that, small tips. This idea keeps coming up. I haven't sort of like formalized anything, but it's just sort of like raw ideas that I'm sharing now. But there's things that we can definitely do. There's things that people coming from other CMSs expect that we could have as options, like the thing that he said, why isn't the menu sticky at the top? It's something that sort of like we have discussed at the past, and I think that the reason why he said that is because WordPress has it sticky on the side, so it's always available. and they sort of like expect that. They don't expect to scroll up and down to find something that will help them navigate in the interface. And it makes sense. All these things are tiny things, as I said, that make sense. The other ones that are specific to Drupal and Backdrop, and the bigger things, I understand that it's going to be harder to solve. I don't have the answer to that.
Tim, you're talking,
Tim,
but
you're
we
muted.
can't hear you.
You're muted.
Is anybody else that hasn't spoken so far have any questions or comments about the usability? Peter, did you want to say anything more about your questions?
I
Okay,
had one more thought too,
good.
is that your mention about like who we should be testing.
Right.
I think the target audience you're after right now is great, because that's who we want to be for, is those like between Drupal WordPress people. But I really liked your comment about we should be testing like problems we've solved in Drupal. And I think that we might want to come up with one of these 15-minute self-guided studies that we could do like at Drupal events, because we have like a captive audience of people who know Drupal, and it would be great to just grab them and be like, hey, sit down, let me show you for 5 minutes, do this thing, see if you can figure out how to do X, and just like throw Backdrop at them with the recording on and see what happens. But I think the results of those should be tracked separately than the results of what we're doing now with the people that we want to be for, because even though Backdrop is meant to be familiar for people with Drupal 7 with all those problems fixed, I think there's like short-term and long-term goals. And I think our long-term goals is to make it better for the people you're testing. And though short-term, we want to get people who are on Drupal 7 to realize that this is a great option for them. We are going to eventually redo like field UI and maybe views UI and stuff, and trying to do it in a way that those people are familiar with it, but that's not going to be our primary concern. So yeah, I think maybe we should track the results of them separately and see the things that because a lot of people in Drupal will also be like, oh, I really like X module on my site and it does things differently. And that I think is the kind of thing that like people coming from WordPress wouldn't know, that there's an X module that solves that problem. So yeah, I don't know. It'll be interesting to see what we get in both cases, but I thought that's...
Hey, Jen, why don't we set up a usability test at Stanford webcam? That would be like we know all of them. They totally let us do that, and that would attract like other Stanford computer nerds to be like, hey, what are you guys doing? And we could probably get some good feedback there.
Yeah, that's great. I'm not sure I can be there that weekend. I have 2 other events that same week. One's in Baltimore and one's in LA. But I would love to help you get set up with everything you need in order to make that happen. So if we can chat offline about that.
Yeah. I mean, well, let's get Quinn involved and like Sharon Cross and people like that. Like they'd help us with that.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Well, so I'm very much enjoying doing these, and I would like to keep doing them, but I would also encourage other people to feel free. It's like,
come to Stanford.
What I'm also trying to do is prove the concept, right? How it works, have a script ready. So really any one of us could now take like, it works pretty, I like using Zoom to record it. Although you could use another tool if you wanted, but even when I was sitting next to the guy, we had a Zoom window open, that's how we recorded it. And I have an existing script, which seems to be working. And that's most of the work. So, you can just identify somebody, make an hour and a half to sit down sit down with them and do this, or do it remotely. The one I did today, we were actually in the same, it's a roommate of mine, and he was downstairs working on his computer, and I sat up in the living room and communicated with him that way. But so you don't have to be next to them. But it actually turned out to be a disadvantage because of the microphone, to be sitting next to the first person.
Yeah. And just to add to what Jen said and what you mentioned before, it's not a waste of your time or our time. I think just if you can do it, keep doing it. I find it very useful, and I'll try to get. I think I have a couple of one at least candidate in mind, so I'll try to do it.
we can't look at it completely that way. And is it a waste of time? It's also, is it the best use of our time, right? Because like I was working with Jen to update that document about the revision stuff. I've also been working on the chat bot, and it's like there are other things. None of these things are a waste of my time, but I can't do them all, right? So
Yeah, I have a response to that as well.
okay.
So I have a billion things on my plate and a billion things that I could be doing. Working with open source and with Backdrop should be fun. So whatever makes you happy. So that's it. That's the answer to that.
And while I agree with that, there's a number of things I enjoy too. So I can't do all the things I enjoy.
Yeah.
So if you guys have ideas like you'd rather see me do one of the other things I enjoy, that's okay. You can tell me
Yeah.
that.
Yep.
So the next steps. One, keep doing them. Jen, if you are going to be in Minneapolis and not going into DrupalCon, and it could easily turn out that I'm in the same boat, we could sit out in the lobby of the convention center and just do usability studies all day. Like
They'll let us.
What?
They'll let us.
Well,
We don't
they
get
can't.
chased away.
They can't stop us. We have the right to gather in the public meeting. Anyways, throwing that out there is something that we could sort of plan to do during DrupalCon, but we'll see. But the takeaways, one, who to do them with, I think we talked about that already. So it's like, I want to do I have a volunteer to do, the only volunteer I've gotten sort of cold is a newcomer to Backdrop, but he's already posted questions in the issue queue, is trying to sub-theme, and has built some sites with Drupal 6 and 7. So he's not like a professional developer, and he's new to Backdrop, and he's like, I'd love to do this. But he would be, I don't think the same test would be useful on him. I'd probably want to test something else. So I'm looking for feedback on that. Like, with that kind of user, what should we be testing? And two,
I think you were spot on earlier, or was it Gregory? Whoever said layouts in CMI, was that Luke? I don't know. Yeah, I think it was Luke. I think that those are two good things to test, and it might also.
Oh, standing on Tim's shoulders.
Layouts, I think, are the thing that is the most like complicated in terms of the new things we've added. Like, we've added a bunch of new features that I think it would be fun for them to stumble across, like scheduling and comment closing and stuff like that. But there isn't really anything to test, not very much there to test. But the layouts thing is completely new. And it's a little bit of a brain bender in terms of concepts coming from Drupal 7 too. So I think that would be my preference, would be like, okay, like change layout on your homepage, create a new landing page using layouts, and then create a new template. Would be like three things that I would focus on. And then, doing it. Okay, now that you've done that, export your config, import it somewhere else, Pantheon or a tugboat demo site or something like that, might also be really compelling too.
I think that introducing the concept of layouts as it is, as you said, might be too much, as in confusing. But if you put it as in, how would you place a block, which is the respective thing of what they're used to be doing in Drupal 7, I guess, and in a much better way. Yeah. So if you ask them to, make the home page have the, most recent comment block on the right or the left. If you guide them towards that and they manage to discover how that's done, then I guess they're going to be impressed. But at the same time, they're going to give us feedback on whether it's easier, more difficult, or pinpoint things that are tiny things that could be improved.
Yeah.
Well, the current test touches on layouts, and that it asks you to place a search block in the footer, right? And you have to get into layouts to do that. And the most obvious takeaway that I've got from the first two tests, which shouldn't be a surprise, is that people, when you say put a search block on every page in the footer, people expect to place it once and have it show up on every page. And that doesn't work, and people are struggling with that a bit. But so we're already learning a little bit about layouts. But I think with a more advanced, like with somebody with Drupal experience, we could get deeper into that. And I think you're right, Gregory. It's about creating a scenario and giving them very specific tasks, like that will drive them to layouts. And sometimes it's about giving them a task that requires layouts, but not telling them that.
Yeah.
And see
that it is layouts. Yeah.
Right. See if they can figure that
I
out.
was just kind of speaking generally, and those are the three things that I would like to be tested. But I think that was not a recommendation for a script.
In all,
you're exactly
sorry.
right that like you have to hand hold the first one where you're like, do this simple thing, and then when they find it, you're like, okay, well now that you've found that, do this slightly more complicated thing. And we did that a little bit in the Drupal 7 usability study. And if somebody failed really miserably at the first one, you're like, let's skip to test 5 because they're never going to get over what was required in step 2 in order to
adaptable scripts to the level of the experience that the person has is not a bad idea.
No.
So I'm training one of our junior service desk people, and I always have those moments that you and other guys described as in, it's right there, just click the button, it's there. It's a moment that everyone does, like they sort of like skim through all the options and it's just the menu. And even though they go, like they hover over the one that makes sense to us, they just don't click it, which is frustrating as a trainer, but still it's a fact. I don't know. As is the fact that people do not read help text. They just don't. So we try to make it as useful. But in all fairness, layouts is something complicated. Same as views, same as fields. Not the same level of complication. I won't try to sort of like categorize them, but they are complicated concepts.
Yeah, maybe I'm wrong to think this way. The problem, I think layouts is hard, and it's going to be hard for people to use, but it's also more important, like that you could build a pretty good site and not have to create a custom view, but you can't really do much unless you get into the layout interface, right? And so we need the urgency of making that better, I feel like, is more important than like making views better, because the people who use views are more advanced users already. So
this actually brings up a question, and forgive me if this is an obvious thing that we have that I don't know about, but do we have any beginning to end setting up a backdrop site tutorials? Like something where somebody that doesn't have their own use of it, just like, what can this thing do? It could sit down and like follow these instructions and you'll end up with, a blog or a thing. Like, do we have anything? Because in something like that, if you could have them, there'd be a step that'd be like, okay, now you go to layout manager and do this to cause that. And like just knowing like a single path through that, the next time through, they'd be in better shape to determine ultimate paths.
So the only thing closest to an answer that I have for you is that our user guide menu on the side, when we were designing the order of how things should go, we were sort of like, I think that we've done it to be progressively harder, as in sort of like have some notion of walking through what a person would possibly configure or start building with their site. If we need to structure it some other way, yeah, by all means.
I don't think you're going to be able to solve this with a structural interface thing. I think there has to be a manual of some sort.
Yep. Well, one of Luke, did you watch either of them yet? Or did you watch the first one yet?
No, I haven't.
One of the big surprises, pleasant surprises of the usability test was the dashboard, which I think you, Luke, helped inspire, right? So both the first user found it quicker. The second user eventually did. Both of them, once they found the dashboard, began to rely on that a lot. And the first one really commented on that. The one today, the first one never clicked on the user manual, but there is a link to the user manual on the dashboard. And today's subject used that. He found that early on in the test and went to the user manual, and that was very helpful for him.
Great.
So something for you, Luke, because you're mentioning the user manual. the Department of Finance, which is running the GovCMS program in Australia, has recently in November open sourced the training manuals that we have, which is what you just mentioned. So the company that I work for has actually done the training manuals for Acquia, because Acquia was the provider for 8 years here, but this has changed. So we have rewritten the entire manuals, but they're for GovCMS 8. But I don't think that it should be a problem to sort of like take things, and you can, because they're open source, you're free to take everything and adapt it. And it's, we converted them, they were initially in PDF and docx format, but now we converted everything to Markdown. So you can contribute even to that, as in, if you find, and at the same time, so
my version of contributing things is writing an initiative description. It says somebody should do this, but I think I'm going to write one that says that. That's a great idea. Take the
yeah. So I'll
the
get you.
GovCMS.
Yeah. So GovCMS is basically a distribution of Drupal, which is like with additional modules. But we have we have 3 trainings: content admin, which is the one that we should be focusing in.
Yeah.
Site builder, and then the developer. The developer doesn't have a manual yet, but the other 2 have. And I think the content admin is the very minimal, like the something that we can start people with, as in how to log into your site, how to create your first page, introduce them to concepts. So I'm gonna share the links with everyone.
Oh yeah, so, well, certainly the builder and content admin are the ones that I had in mind. I think developers are of any stripe are more self-sufficient and don't need quite this much, but certainly, I mean, site builders are my focus, but the other stuff counts too.
Yeah, just shared the things on Gitter with you guys. So,
okay.
Cool. Yep.
Should to blend this over to the dev meeting discussions about initiatives, where does should like the UX testing be an initiative? Or, I mean, I feel a little bit like it's wasting an initiative if it's happening already, but I don't know if that's the right way to think about it, right? Because it's like if it's important, that helps me focus my energy if it is an initiative. But I don't know. Any thoughts on that?
I mean, I think like user experience could be an initiative. Like it doesn't just have to be studies. And then like maybe right now the focus is doing a study, and then next quarter we have like 3 major issues that are part of that initiative that are getting attention. And that way studies can continue to happen, right. But it's not, it can be a larger initiative that it falls under.
Right.
I was about to say, if we have metas for initiatives, we're gonna need a giga something for that, because it's a very broad thing. And I'm all in. I'm very interested in that. But
yeah, I mean, it could be a project. Right?
It's probably an ongoing thing. It will ever be, because we are dedicated on making Backdrop easier, which implies user experience improvements all the time. So.
Well, exactly how big or broad initiatives are, I think we're still working out. But I feel like just saying UX should be initiative feels too broad to me.
Yeah.
Like, because there's always, but yeah, but we'll have to sort that out.
We can also figure out like what an initiative is for. But if it's the kind of thing where it's like, these are the 8 things Backdrop cares about, I think user experience should be one of them. And there should always be something that we're doing to improve the user experience.
Right.
And so I don't know. Yeah, it's huge. Right.
Well, that actually to me argues again. Like I was going to suggest that sort of a definition of an initiative is something that ends, something that once you do it, it's done. You've completed it. You've checked off. But maybe that's not the same idea.
So yes, but some initiatives that non-technical people can be involved in is an initiative about producing a Backdrop manual, and an initiative about producing videos, like video tutorials.
Yep.
So this does not require coding. It might require interaction with people that work on code, just to point out things to them that could be improved. But other than that, and it will be ongoing, because as we improve the interface, the manual will have to be updated. So yeah.
Oh yeah, the best people to create manuals are people that don't know how to use the thing. Like they're the ones that can figure it out, that know what questions to ask.
Yep.
Okay, well, we're getting to the end of our time here. I just wanted to quickly mention that we have a handful of issues that are related to usability. You can find an issue queue in square brackets in case anyone here wants to work on them. And we also have a handful of design issues. There was one thing I thought we needed to talk about this week, and the rest of it doesn't necessarily need to be addressed.
Yeah. Just as a quick note, not addressing it, but just I saw a thing that was saying update process is wonky. What does that refer to? Which issue specifically?
I don't know. I think it was just everything about trying to update a module through the user interface.
Okay.
So I think we had like
Yeah.
8 issues about that, but I don't know if there's a meta.
Yeah. I remember now what it was. Yeah. Having modules show up when you try to update themes and so on. Yeah. Yeah, I remember. Which could be other things as well, but yeah.
But there's one issue in particular that has like 190 comments or something that seems like not a very important issue. But everybody has very strong feelings about it, and that's the position of the delete log messages button on the log page. And so last week we got Darius to come and weigh in on what he thought we could do, but his designs were sort of best case scenario end goal. And we have a couple of things in there that we can't do yet, but we already have issues for and we know we're going to want to do. And so now we're stuck in this place where it's like, okay, we had the designer tell us what we should do, but now we need to figure out what we can do. It would be really good if we could sort of just make a decision and then put that issue to rest, and we can work on the things that, you know, Darius said we should do, that we know that we should do, that we already have issues for, and say, we'll revisit this after those are done. And so, Gregory, I tested your pull request and left a comment in the queue. I don't know what our process should be for making a decision on that. Like, should we get Darius back in and say A or B and have him let us know? Or what do you guys think? This is a, like...
If we bring experts and they say not necessarily A or B, but here are the pros and cons of A, here are the pros and cons of B, and not necessarily what they prefer, but yeah, I think it would help us make decisions. I think that someone mentioned at some point, oh, it was Judzen. I applaud you on doing the thing as in pointing the problems and who they're targeted for, because it would help us. So it prioritize what's a biggest problem. So if something is a problem for the end user, then that should be prioritized. If it is about terminology and the developer, yeah, put it on the side. But yeah, I think that any input from any expert in any field that we request help with is helpful. I haven't seen the comment. I'll have to.
Yeah. Okay.
Can a question on that issue? I've sort of stepped back from it just because it got so muddled. I didn't have strong opinions and I had other things to work on. But didn't somebody that was working on it initially go ahead and release like a contrib module that did a version of this already? And I'm just wondering, like, that's not a bad thing to do, but, well, yeah, I don't even know what I'm saying. I don't know. If one option isn't to like let people try out that contrib module for a little while, but.
Yeah, that's also another thing is we could say it's fine the way it is. We'll revisit it after we get the other things done. Like, we can't make a decision, so let's not do anything at all. Is also an option.
Well, the point I guess I'm trying to make is even if we made that decision, progress would have been made because there is now a contrib module that there wasn't, which provides an alternative for some people who feel strongly about it, if I remember correctly.
I know there's a contrib module for Drupal 7 that people referenced. I don't know if there's a Backdrop version or not, but I think I don't know. I need to look at it, but I think somebody was like, we could always just use this module, but I'm not sure that was ready for Backdrop. It might have been like there's this Drupal 7.
I could be wrong, but I thought somebody just like went and ported it in the middle of this discussion.
Yeah.
So I read your comment then real quick, and it's worth mentioning a few other comments that were there before that. So yes, I agree about removing the danger thing, but having the danger class and making it prominent made that thing seem like the most important thing in the page.
Well, especially at the top.
Sorry?
Especially at the top. But what if it's
yes, so I'm not discussing that because I'm all for it. Like, if you want to move it, let's move it. So as I said,
let's move it and not add the class. Let's just move it.
Like move it to the bottom.
Put the
Move it
text
to the bottom.
with the text back around it. Can we try that?
Oh yes, the
Okay.
thing that says we remove the danger class, and then people might delete it even if we have the confirmation thing. I think someone was it Herb. Someone said there's only so much hand holding that we can do. Like
Yeah.
if we shown a confirmation message with big red letters everywhere, and they clicked yes, then like. But
Yeah, I still think it would be good. It would be good to get a warning before you click the button and get to that page too. And so just like the way the field set was before, where it's like, just so you know, this is dangerous. I don't know. That seemed like enough.
yeah, but people, I don't. All right, look, I don't object putting the danger thing back, but there were others that said, "Oh, this is too prominent now."
Yeah, no, I don't mind. You can leave the danger thing off. I just want the field set back.
Okay,
I don't know.
field set and collapsed.
Yeah,
Or-
no, open, because people didn't
Open.
like the click. Yeah. So if we can solve the click problem by making it open, solve the like boldness problem by removing the danger class, solve the danger by adding a confirm form. I feel like that's already 3 steps in the right direction. And then if we can move it to the bottom of the page, it'll make half the people unhappy and half the people happier. So
So I have a question.
Yes.
So the point is that people don't like opening a collapsed field set, right?
no. Well, that's one of the points.
That
but-
was why the issue was started.
No.
No.
The issue was started because the delete button used to be between the filters and the list. And we don't have any other places where there's anything between the filters and the list. So we moved the delete button out from that in between state. And then it became the first thing on the page. And then we're like, it shouldn't go there. So that was the original, where do we put the button was the point of the issue. And then the field set was like a secondary thing where I was like, why is it inside a collapsed field set? And then the answer was, oh, because it's dangerous. And so then it's like, can't we solve the dangerous problem without introducing a click? So it was a
That
slippery
seems-
slope.
This seems like a lot of work doing UI design for a page we don't actually want the users to go.
Yeah, it's mostly a developer tool. The button is definitely a developer tool. And 190 comments is a lot for something that's not
Mhm.
super important. But everybody apparently has very strong feelings on the matter.
Okay.
Okay.
I don't know. It just seems like it's going to end up exactly the same. And we still don't want the average end user to go to that page anyway. So I don't know.
Okay.
I think that the most important functionality in this page is being able to filter through the messages. So we say that.
Yeah.
There have been a few comments here and there noting this specific issue about saying when I have a problem like spam bots flooding the site or something, and there's a billion messages of the same, all I want to do is filter down to that, remove the 99,900 and whatever, and just keep one of them because they're the same. So I think that things like being able to selectively delete things or have that thing be as a view is far more. What I'm saying, yes, it's too many comments. We should come to a decision. Yeah.
Okay, well, I'm also happy to not do anything. We want to just like,
Park it until we have the confirmation messages. Like focus our energy on actually introducing confirmation
No.
messages.
or something.
Yeah, or the what you call it, the sticky things, and then revisit this issue,
Yeah.
which is what the experts suggested that we do. I'm happy.
Okay.
I'm happy to just say that we didn't make a decision. We'll work
We're
on other
deciding
things.
to not make a decision.
Yeah, or something like that.
It's very unsatisfying, but
If we look, we don't have to phrase it like that. We say the
Postpone.
decision has been made that what Darius has suggested is the best, but we need prerequisites, so we have to work on the other tickets first. Let's focus on those and then come back to this.
Okay.
Once we have them, because I mean the dialogues thing can be applied in so many things, like in the user interface. It's not going to be just for that. This could be an initiative on its own.
Like every confirm form could be a modal.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Then we have a couple of design issues. Nothing that's super urgent, but if anyone's interested to see what issues we have in core for design, there is a label for design. It's just called design. You can see what that is. And in the, I'm just looking at the other lists. I don't think there's anything else urgent we need to talk about. I do need to order the banners for Backdrop's event. So if anyone has any strong recommendations on vendors to use for that, I was thinking about doing something like, what's that company that does all the like business cards? I don't know, one of the big names.
Right.
That does this cheap stuff, but Vistaprint maybe. Anyway, if you have any thoughts, let me know. Throw a comment in the issue. Otherwise, we'll order those. Anything else anyone wants to add for this meeting?
So there was a UX issue with, so we've made it so that maintenance mode is not being automatically, it's being automatically disabled when you finish updating modules, but we have not taken account into pending database updates. So we have a situation where people run updates, the site as expected goes into maintenance mode. When the updates finish successfully, it goes out of maintenance mode, but then there's pending database updates, so it needs to go back to maintenance mode again. And I think I must have another issue somewhere to sort of like do not show the pending database updates step at all if there's no database updates, because what the user does is it clicks the button and says, nope, nothing here. So, all right, why did you make me click there then? So I think we can sort of like solve two things with one pull request, maybe. So yeah, I still didn't get the time to comment on that issue. But yeah, thought I might bring it up.
I have a thing that's on the other side of the universe from that one, and then from very specific, it goes to a giant scope creeping thing. So it's not like I'm gonna suggest any discussion. I'm totally putting this in as a future agenda item. Yes. But a few days ago, I suggested an initiative about themes that could be included with Backdrop, and that like touches on a larger issue of people building Backdrop sites need often some level of artistic guidance or guide rails, and I think at some point we should talk about that in this meeting. You know, just what end user should do to create pretty sites.
I saw that forum post and I meant to respond there, but the quick version of my thoughts is that if we had Drupal 7 and we were discussing that, yes, but now in Backdrop we have the project browser. So people can install themes from the project browser the same way that they're able to do it, in a similar way that they're able to do it in WordPress. So the other point is that if we add more themes in core, then we are sort of like bound, like we have more workload, like we need to maintain those, and this is more work.
Speaking of which, I definitely didn't want to cover this now. I only want to mention it as a future agenda item because it's just giant.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, we can add it to the to-do thing and discuss it next time. Yes. Yes, thanks, Dan.
All right, that's all I got.
Okay. Jeff, you just popped in. Is there anything you want to add, or are you here for the developer meeting?
Developer.
All right, well then let's go ahead and wrap this one up. We'll kick that meeting off in just a minute. Thanks everybody for coming to Design and Usability meeting, and we'll be back soon.
Bye.